And with the Mario Brothers and plumbing's a game, we're not like the others who get all the fame. If your sink is in trouble, you can call us on the double. We're faster than the others, you'll be hooked on the brothers.
Good morning, video games. Welcome to Filthy Casuals, a podcast about video games, hosted by three very kind and extremely knowledgeable boys. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is...
Oh, the nerves. The nerves have got to him.
Stop looking at me. My name is Tommy Daslow, and with me as always...
It's Ben Vanel here. Tommy, not messing up a single word in my own introduction, and joining me on the other end of the table is...
My Tommy is Adam.
Yes, it's spreading.
Yeah, it's contagious.
It is really weird. I actually...
Pardon
Jesus
me?
Christ. I recorded another podcast last night, Ooh Spooky, which is another podcast I do in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the second podcast I'm doing in real life again after a month or whatever. It's been more than
a month, I think.
2
Yeah.
months.
nearly
Yeah.
2. Yeah. Fucking hell. And it still feels weird.
Yeah.
We're back in the same room. They've eased restrictions a bit here in Victoria. We're allowed to gather with up to 5.
Yep.
So we've got 2 guests here. It's Mario and Luigi.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
But did
Which one was that?
Hey, I'm a Luigi.
Okay.
That's the other one. Those were both pretty good.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of time in isolation to practice my mirror talking so I can get myself off over my Nintendo characters like normal.
How did you find recording in the same room last night? It's weird.
weird.
It's weird to get back. It was weird because it's like the constant evolution of this whole mess is that you just start getting used to something and then it changes again. And for all the faults with recording over Zoom and how difficult it was to get used to, just had gotten into a bit of a rhythm with it.
Yeah.
And then now I'm sitting here and I'm realizing I can't just minimize you guys and open up another browser window if I get bored and start looking around at Facebook.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a fan of this.
Well, Knox and I just did our first Twitch stream last night, which twitch.tv/filthycasualspod. Jump on board. And through it, we found the best video chat software in the world. It was like, finally, a lag-free way to do the podcast.
It's existed for years too.
Yeah.
ICQ is fucking old. It was around before, I think, like fucking HTTP kind of internet or www internet. I don't know the difference. I shouldn't speak out of my ass because I don't know anything about the history of technology here in this episode that we're doing about 80s video game. But fuck me, it was way better.
Yeah, it was so good.
Than Zoom and shit. But yeah, useless now because we're obligated to meet up in real life again. We can go back if we want, I suppose.
We could.
Yeah.
It's nicer for the vibe though. And it's nice to see you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of HTTP web addresses,
Where is this going to go?
I guess I can.
You ever been to Pornhub.com?
While
Pretty
you guys,
good.
while you guys were doing your Twitch stream last night, I was enjoying in a bit of eased restriction socializing with a couple of friends of mine, and a friend of mine. I guess I can say the name of the company because it's pretty crucial to the story. She works at a company called Dot Design. And she told me they were having a meeting, or her housemate was telling me she had overheard this girl having a meeting with her colleagues.
How many different ways can you design a dot?
Yeah.
You're like, why don't we make it purple?
Talk about essentially trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
But they were having she overheard her housemate who works for Dot Design having a meeting about trying to come up with a new website domain.
Right.
And so it's just literally this group of people sounding like they're all going mad because it's people sitting there going, what about www.
No, yeah,
dot
you can't.
com, like
Fuck, how would you do that?
it almost seems like a name for you just shouldn't have called the business that. Like you have to think
I got
like
their slogan. I got a slogan pitch. Dot design. It's the best in design. Full stop.
there you go.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
What's your website? www.ellipsis.com.
Yeah.
There's no way to do that well. Fuck, that makes me worried about my new company, http://w//
All spelt phonetically.
Yeah. Question mark, exclamation mark. Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, I guess it is nice to be back in real life, seeing people again. But beyond even this being recorded, the last two even social interactions that I've had, the only ones that I've had over a long period of time are also on record, which is a strange feeling too.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked for a bit before we did this, but it's weird going back to, in quotes, normal, or to adjust to whatever they're fucking calling it the new normal is and whatever.
Yeah.
So,
There's going to be a lot of adjustment coming up.
Yeah.
And we're obviously very lucky in our country. I think, we've done all
Totally.
right with it
Yeah.
compared to a lot of other places in the world. So obviously if you're listening to this in a part of the world where things are still pretty gnarly and you're not able to socialize, our thoughts are with you. Our hearts go out to you. But it's...
and if it helps, we feel weird about doing it.
Yeah, totally.
I took for granted how good it was to not have to go to anything.
That's the big
People are
thing.
going to start inviting you to shit again, and you're going to have to find excuses.
Well, I think we'd all gotten used to a part of getting used to the as annoying as it was to do it over Zoom. It was kind of nice that it's like literally just have to get ready 2 minutes before 3 p.m. And then once it's done, you're just in your house, you're back, and all of a sudden, we were talking about this the other day, having to factor in, there's like an extra element now where you've got to factor in driving to and from one of our houses. Adam's been pretty keen to get out of his house. He doesn't drive. So one of us, little Lord Fauntleroy style, has to deliver you to and from the Knox Towers every time we record.
It's like we're divorced parents. All right, you got Adam today. I'll bring him round.
Yeah.
Very different experience for me too, though, as well, to not be able to just roll out of bed, no pants on, and start recording. You were very judgmental about my decision to continue not wearing pants. Talking about upholstery and ruining and whatever you were saying.
We were walking to my car and there was a surgical mask just lying on the ground covered in mud, and I said, do you want to pick that up and put that on if you're going to get into my car? It's just good to be back doing IRL gags with the boys.
I missed the visual gag.
Yes.
You couldn't get any better. A surgical mask lying in the gutter.
Oof.
It was a real gift from the comedy gods. It was like, my mind was racing. What am I going to do with this?
Well, we've lost one of the visual gags that we could do for the past 2 months. No more, I'm just going downstairs, boys, and then going slowly out of the frame of the video.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a shame. I'll miss that. I know.
No more funny backgrounds. What do you think you'd be doing on Zoom right now if we were reminiscing about Zoom?
It's demented stuff.
Is this brain damage?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah, to an extent. But hey, it's nice to be back in the old podcasting studio, talking in the same room with each other for this auspicious occasion of the late 80s in video games.
Yeah.
What a time to have been alive, long before any of this. Before the Zoom... Are you talking about yet to be relevant hero Sonic the Hedgehog?
Yes.
He's the only thing I know that zooms so far. It's me, 1987 man.
He's probably a rabbit at this point. Sega are kind of cooking him up as then they're trying to think of a competitor to Mario.
He's
and he
still
was
slow
a rabbit
at
at
this
one point.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They haven't even decided on him being quick.
They haven't decided on a speed yet.
Medium.
Just going back and forth. What if he's tiptoes?
The late 80s were fast moving though. It was interesting
Absolutely.
looking up all the, stuff that and whatever, and you can tell probably from the last episode we're doing a loose history here. This is fast and happy.
This is what you need to know. There's a lot of younger people listening to the show who just literally don't know any of the history of video games. This is a Cliff Notes. This is I
wish that I'd have ever gotten a Cliff Notes on what the fuck Cliff Notes were. I never knew that Cliff Notes was like a brand of book that they put out a summary of more complicated things.
Oh, is it the brand? I thought it was. Is it the brand that's become the term?
I think so. I think it's like Kleenex or Xerox or whatever.
There was one I used to use during uni called Spark Notes, and it was online. It wasn't a physical book. You didn't write as many essays hastily as I did.
I never. The Cliff Notes I used was a brand called Bullshitting.
Yeah.
That was a very, very helpful technique because one thing that you learn if you do, which I studied texts at uni as well. I did like arts sort of things. And everything that they will ever get you to study has exactly the same themes. You can just rewrite it. They're always the same.
Oh, it's about the human experience.
Yeah, it's about isolation and loneliness. And
or love.
Oh, good, I'm learning about the fucking that. But... Yeah, I'd never needed it, but we'll give you a run over of the last. This is like what the actual formative point of modern video games, the late 80s.
Yeah.
The early 80s was a lot of like, oh, we're fucking figuring it out. Maybe Sonic's a rabbit. But then in the late 80s, genres that are still around to this day are made up.
Yeah. So we talked last week, arcade games and then the Atari, but still format-wise, games very different. These kind of pretty small, self-contained experiences that were more about replayability and trying to beat a high score, and a lot of stuff happening on a single screen, not quite worked out to what they are today. And we talked a bit about the video game crash of 83.
83, yeah.
Where a lot of stuff being very hastily put onto the shelves, and then retailers being left with too much excess stock, and video games dying off and essentially being a fad.
But then being kind of carried through. Sorry, were you gonna?
Well,
there's a bit of delay. Is there?
Which is an odd. It's an odd statement.
Ben's frozen.
To say about
Ben
1983, because that's the year that the Famicom comes out.
In Japan.
In Japan.
In Japan, yes.
And in a very slow burn is my impression of it. It comes out with like a few games. It's the start, and then like Donkey Kong's in there, and then it takes a while for them to start hitting the big fucking Mario Brother type things.
Yes.
Well, Nintendo are a card. They've made some arcade games, but there's still probably a lot of people that they like made little card games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It'd be like, imagine if the makers of Cards Against Humanity came out and were like, "We're launching a console, boys."
I could imagine that happening.
Yeah.
You can't. You have to turn it on by saying "fuck."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
Or you have
gonna
to say,
offend
like-
your mum.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bash a granny. It's got one game built into it.
Yeah.
Imagine
Harry
if-
Potter is
Hitler.
a murderer. Yeah.
It's always someone nice is Hitler.
Yeah.
That's their first release. Someone nice is Hitler 64.
I guess you'd call it indie gaming scene now on computers as well.
Right, yeah.
That starts coming to a point where companies that became enormous, especially during the 90s, being formed off the back of that. A bit like Rareware is, or they're called whatever they were originally called at that point. Silicon something? No.
Something Ultimate Play the Game.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
that's
Yeah.
the one.
Yes.
And
Silicon something.
You're thinking of Pammy.
Yeah. She was about to hit the scene. I
Early
think.
90s.
Yeah.
Fair mistake.
late 80s. That's
Yeah.
Baywatch time.
Yep.
So that stuff starts transitioning into like PC games becoming really robust towards the end of the 80s here. DOS games especially become like sort of the default. There's like the Amigas and the Acorns and those other computers that continue to compete, but IBM computers in particular, and then Microsoft things become the standard towards the end of this. You got a few big fucking consoles come out.
Oh, yeah.
You got the fucking NES. You ever heard of that motherfucker? Stands for never. Oh, no. Never expect something. If I go to
That'd be that's a good character. Tony Soprano learning about the Nintendo Entertainment System for the first time.
Where's his fucking brother? I'm seeing Mario.
I'm
Where's the
obsessed
fucking...
with these fucking ducks. These ducks. I keep trying to shoot them out of the air.
Yeah, none of us can do a fucking Tony Soprano.
They call it the Famicom in Japan. The family computer.
That's what it's all about. Family.
The Familia,
I like this thing.
The Familia computer.
Master System, get the fuck out of here. Nobody's my fucking boss. Ain't no
would've
one mastering me.
That would have been incredible. They bring it to the States, and everywhere it's called the Nintendo Entertainment System, except for in New Jersey. It still has the name of Family Computer because they think that'll shift more units. But yeah, so this is something that I've never been fully clear on, but as I understand it, the video games crash and like the Amiga and all that, all those consoles that we talked about in the last episode taking off.
The
That's
Atari and stuff.
the Atari. That's very Western centric.
Yes.
Right. So all of that kind of happens in a bubble, which means that kind of parallel to that, Nintendo are developing the Famicom, and they're not dealing with the fallout so much of the video.
Yes.
They're kind of developing it in isolation, like without the full context of all of that stuff that's going on.
Those consoles were a lot more popular in the West, and were often Western companies making them.
Yeah.
And computers were a lot more popular in Japan for games.
Yeah.
At the time. So the Famicom, my understanding is, and if you were in 1980s Japan and have something different to say about this, fuck, that's interesting. Please actually
hit us up.
Yeah.
Come on the show.
Yeah.
The Famicom, as a computer, or is marketed as such, it is a disk-based system that launches and is promoted as a computer. Like the MSX, I think, was a big computer over there.
Oh, yeah.
But like the consoles coming out, that only really starts to kick off in Japan towards the mid to late 80s with like the Sega fucking SG 1000, something like that.
Let's see if I can find that.
I think it's the SG 1000. Or it might be called the Mark 1 in Japan.
No, you're
or the
right.
Mark
Yeah,
2.
it is the SG 1000. You're spot on.
Fuck
I don't
yeah.
know how you've remembered that.
Man, because I got nothing of value up in this brain. I can tell you a video game release date, and I can tell you to get the fuck out of my face.
I think, like in terms of Japan, early to mid 80s up to 85. There's a lot of distributors. Like there's like Taito is a big one, but they are making or at least distributing sort of arcade games and console games.
And they're putting out like
games.
Ultima and that sort of like those PC games from the West.
Yeah.
They're translating them and putting them out in Japan, and those were very big towards the time, which leads to the RPGs that you get on the NES or the Famicom, like Final Fantasy and Dragon fucking Quest and all that sort of stuff.
I actually ordered a book about all this stuff.
You did it too late.
About a month and a half ago. So I look forward to weighing in on this topic in 3 months' time when the book finally turns up from the UK.
But in 1985, which is where we're sort of kicking off here.
Yes.
In the West, at least, which is the easier perspective for us to look at things from, you've got the NES, you got the Master System, and it's pretty much already locked down to, other than computers, those being it.
Yes.
The Atari is still being supported, and the 2600 and like the 52 and the 70, whatever.
A whole bunch of weird shit, actually. Atari starts releasing like the 65XE and the 130XE, a bunch of like weird computer things. Yeah.
And computers were so different at the time, where they were individual isolated platforms, not in the way that computers these days are like running one of technically like 4 operating systems, but really 2.
Yeah.
And really, if you want to play games, 1. The
Linux.
Ben pushed his glasses up with his finger, like right in the middle of the frame.
Actually, Linux is the most adaptable and interesting operating system to use. You can run several different kinds of programs on Linux.
It's true, but fuck off.
I always see that, like when someone's like, "Oh, what kind of computer should I get? What kind of what's the best for this?" And there's some fucking nerd in the comments like, "Well, Linux actually is the best one to use."
And it's okay to be a nerd and to love Linux and all that shit, but if someone's asking for a recommendation on a computer, they're definitely not at the point where it's like, well, Ubuntu can.
Yes, exactly.
When someone says, "What should I go for?" Probably just Windows these days.
Windows, just a cheap laptop. Yeah. That's probably all you need.
Are you specifically referencing our friend Josh Earl's post from about a week ago, where it was like, "Hey, I want to buy a laptop. Wouldn't mind not spending the crazy amount of money that a Mac needs."
Interesting.
And saw a Linux recommendation pop up in the mix.
Couldn't confirm or deny that, Tommy.
For someone whose post literally says, like, I use Word.
I don't edit podcasts.
Anyway, there's always one. There's always one in here.
Yeah. Continuing with our computer recommendation podcast. So the NES as well is far and away the bigger in the US. And then in European markets, Sega gets a little bit more of a foothold.
That's
and then later on, way later, they start releasing all the consoles in like Brazil, especially. They get fucking massive. And in other parts of the world, Sega has more of a foothold. But in the West, the NES is kind of number 1.
Yep.
You got the Master System at number 2. And then later in the 80s, you get some more stuff showing up like the Mega Drive, which we probably won't talk about that much in this episode.
Probably not. When does that come out? 89?
89.
Yeah,
I think like 88 in Japan. So much more of a 90s thing.
But like exactly. The whole vibe of it is so 90s.
Yeah.
Like the games on it, the way it's marketed.
Oh, it's nice how well everything fits into the first 5 or the second 5 years of a decade for our purposes for this. So yeah, it And the NES is fucking popular.
Yes.
But Nintendo faced this pretty big battle to even get it over to the States. After the video games crash, no stores are interested in carrying games anymore. So they basically have to...
Because from their point of view, it's like someone coming along to you in fucking 2005 or whatever and being like, do you want to buy some more Furbies?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's like, well, no, we had them. They were big, but they're done. No one cares
Yeah.
anymore about games, which were a toy for a bit. It's a tickle me Elmo.
Yeah, so Nintendo America, they redesigned the Famicom completely to make it look... I think the thinking was it looked... the Japanese version of it, it's it's like that cream and
Golden red.
red color. So it looks a bit like a toy. So the
controllers on the Famicom are attached to the system as well. You slide them in. They got very short cables that come out of it, which I think like kind of fit with the way that most Japanese households were set up. Where they were expecting people to kind of sit in front of the TV on the floor, in front of close to it. But again, in the West, that doesn't make as much sense because people are on a couch far away from the TV.
Yeah, and
so
they
redesigned that aspect.
They redesigned the whole thing. They refer to it as a control deck, like all the initial marketing of it.
I love that shit that Nintendo did from here through the N64 where they called things like a control pack with a K, no C.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fuck, I loved that shit. It made it seem like I was RoboCop. You know what I mean? Just,
I want to just back up what you said, Tommy, about the States being pretty skeptical about the NES. There's a quote here from the March 1985 issue of Electronic Games. The quote is, "The video game market in America has virtually disappeared, and this could be a miscalculation on Nintendo's part."
Wow.
crazy.
I mean, it's not ridiculous to say at the time, but boy, have they been proven wrong.
Yeah.
But they really had to do a lot. They basically had to trick retailers into taking it in. They had to completely change the look of it, the language that they were using to describe it, to... it trick retailers into wanting to carry it. I think
it became AV equipment, right? It was.
I think they were selling it as like this.
Yeah.
They were hoping to appeal to like, I think like the dads of the family
The
wanting to have
hi-fi
this
heads.
cool new piece of tech and not like
Because like
not
VHS
a toy,
is
not a
big,
game.
Like VHS and Betamax probably
they've just
around.
competed, and I think that was a pretty profitable thing for stores having those compete with each other. But then like audio equipment especially is changing enormously around this time, where like CD is kind of like it's coming in a little bit. And tapes and records and vinyl, and like people are refreshing their like sort of audio visual setups pretty hugely around this time, I think.
Right.
And this slotting into that, calling it an entertainment system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Making it like the grey box that looks like a VCR. It's even got the front lid.
Yeah.
Same as putting a VHS into something.
Yeah.
They've completely repositioned it in a really clever way at the time.
Yeah,
of like,
they have to really be sneaky to get over that hurdle of the video games crash and to kind of like reignite video games. They also...
And rather than the Toys R Us's and whatever the fuck of the time, stocking them primarily, it became those, and I don't know American shops or what was around at the time, but a Best Buy or a Radio Shack or whatever the fuck. They started looking more at those people.
Yeah. And also a big part of the crash, which we talked about last week, was there being basically no quality control on the games. Like anyone could have a punt at making a game and like licensing and everything. And Nintendo bring in this, basically the Nintendo seal of quality. They essentially start the whole thing of third-party licensing for games to combat this against this same thing happening again. So if you want to make a game for the NES, you essentially have to go through them to get the development kit, to get that like golden stamp. Did you guys ever have... Growing up, I remember having a couple of games that weren't licensed by Nintendo, and they were these like weird cartridges that had like a little flap in the top of the cart. You needed to have an actual licensed Nintendo game in order to play. So I think it was sort of
like...
like...
It was like a security chip or whatever in
something
that
like
NES
that.
cartridge.
So it was like a
Fucking
cartridge
hell.
that would plug into the NES. Then that cartridge would have a little flap on the top of it that would open up, that then you would plug a legit cartridge into that.
Yeah.
And it would just basically use whatever bits from the licensed one it needed to in order to run this absolute dog shit game that you would play and go, yep, good move, boys. You absolutely should not have given the green light to this being on your system.
With those older consoles, that is like a piracy or a what's the cleaner word for piracy when it's just like the modding community.
Oh, sure, right.
that is a technique that they still use. Is just like, well, we need this security chip, so we'll rip it off of fucking Tetris Sphere. Who cares?
Right.
And here's your new N64 game.
But I remember, like, still, that's the funny thing is, like, this wasn't sanctioned by Nintendo. It essentially not so much piracy, but whatever you'd call it. But it was still on for sale at Target. I remember buying it at a legitimate shop.
Do you remember what the game was?
Yeah, fuck.
God, I'm sure if I did a bit of a Google, I could probably find it, but I can't really remember. I think I remember being interested in, like, there was something on the box that looked kind of cool, and just also the fact that it had a big thing, like, hey, you need an actual like, just kind of being drawn to, like, the kind of weirdness of that, not really fully understanding what was going on.
Yeah.
But I do remember them pushing that, like, that golden seal, and for a little while thinking, oh yeah, this means the game is going to be good. Yeah. And then it's like, no, they basically all have that.
Yeah, they all have it. It means they paid a certain amount of blood money to Nintendo, their respect money, you know.
Yeah.
And then they can get that.
Now,
and you learn that the hard way when you see that seal of quality approval on, like, Dr. Franken for the Game Boy.
Yeah.
You play that and you're like, oh, yuck.
Now, we spoke about how Nintendo had to sort of smuggle this into the American market by making it look like a piece of audio-visual equipment. Now, what better to combine with that than a plastic robot called Rob? That really just screams serious technology.
Yeah.
They did Rob for the US market.
Yeah.
They had the light gun banging out early.
Yeah.
They had the fucking power glove.
Yep.
They had all their dumbass fucking extras at some point over that. But I think a lot of that happened after the NES had kicked off.
Right.
But I think that was part of the strategy.
Rob
to
is
keep
part of
it
launch,
as,
though, yeah.
like, as a tech. This isn't a toy. This isn't a games thing. I think this is still them trying to keep retailers, like,
Sure.
Hey, we're at the forefront of this, like, technological
the
innovation,
world of
and
tomorrow.
this is how we're going to sell it to people. Like,
and at the time as well, more so than today, really. At the time, like, those sort of animatronic things, especially from Japan, were very, like, those little fucking robot dogs and all that shit.
Sure,
that were a bit later, but people were kind of intrigued by that stuff.
I had this little robot toy that had all these little different games. He'd, like, talk to you, and he had all these, like, different games built into him. Like, he had these little different coloured buttons on his chest, and one of them was like a memory thing where he would, like, talk to you and go red, green, blue, and you'd push it, and then he'd go red, green, blue, yellow, blue, and, like, it just got more and more
Free
complex.
me from this torture.
I remember my neighbour had an ROB, and it legitimately scared me. Like, he turned it on. He's like, check this out, isn't this cool? And he, like, turned it on, and it's, like, kind of like moving around, and it just, the design of him is, like, so Terminator-esque. Like, I remember just fucking hating ROB. Like, still now having a bit of a, it was like that weird neighbor that was into, like, making, like, homemade explosives and stuff, like, that had, like, a rat bag older brother that was just into all this, like, full Dero stuff, and so it was like,
we all had one of those, did we?
The ROB was, like, his thing, where I was like, he's gonna train this thing to, like, kill someone. I was, like, real sus on it. I hated it.
Some other companies that kicked off in 85, Bethesda is founded in 1985. Codemasters, a little Japanese company called Square, is founded in 1985, which makes the Final Fantasy story particularly weird.
The fact that they got found and then, like, all right, immediately we're out of money. Exactly. This is going to be our last game.
Literally 2 years later, they're like, we fucked it, I guess. And then they make the best franchise of all time, arguably.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story.
It's good.
Yeah.
Our
swan song.
Yeah.
All right, just one more job.
It's like, I haven't even finished the degree I started at the start of this company.
Yeah. This is a bit like, it's a bit like we're pivoting kind of outside of video games briefly, but have you guys read much about Quibi?
I know
this
what
new,
it is.
like,
I've seen
streaming
people
app?
talking about Quibi.
Yeah.
It's a phone app. It's a streaming service that all exists on this phone app.
We're Hearby. We're Quibi. Get used to it.
And it's all stuff that's been they've got, like, I think it's like an ex-DreamWorks guy. It's like a very well-known, like, media person who set it up and basically gotten a lot of talent to make these shows that are all designed to be watched on the commute, and they're all filmed in a way where you can watch them portrait or landscape. No eps go for, like, longer than about 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. And I looked through all the trailers, and a lot of the things on there look interesting, but with all of them, you go, I'd love it if that was a series at 21 minutes that I could watch on TV instead of having to be on my phone. But then, of course, it launches right around when COVID starts. No one's commuting anymore. People are like, you know what? I've got all the time in the world. I don't need to watch a 2-minute sketch. And they've sunk billions into it. And they've been out this week going, oh yeah, COVID really fucked us. And you know, what a shame. You know, it's just like it's a similar thing. We've just launched and we're almost immediately bankrupt and fucked it.
It sounds like that thing might not have done that well, COVID or not.
100%.
But with the Master System and the NES coming out, kind of around the same-ish time in Japan at least, I think it's interesting the different approaches that they both have to what games they seem to predominantly be providing. Because so Sega's still big in the arcades. Nintendo aren't really putting out as many arcade games. So they still are.
And they had hits, and they have hits.
And those hits are being put on the NES and stuff. And yeah, Sega as well, I guess, but they're still making big arcade games. And at this time, they're definitely seen as the people pushing arcade technology forward.
Right.
With all their fucking, I always forget the name of it. Space Harrier? The behind the back one where it's kind of 3D and it's very fast.
Yeah, Space Harrier.
Outrun, Hang On, and all those sort of things.
Gauntlet comes out this year, which is an Atari.
Sega?
No, it's an Atari one. I'm just looking at some other big arcade releases. Because the arcade releases are still the dominant releases.
And so that's interesting to me about the Master System is that it was still kind of pushing it as like the arcade comes home.
Yeah.
But the NES is like, this is a different thing. And here's Mario, which isn't out in the arcades.
They pivot into, like we were talking about, games are very different before the crash. Nintendo pivot into, well, what's the long term here? Like people aren't playing this for, 15 minutes at a time and putting, $4 worth of coins and going, I don't want to spend any more money.
Yeah.
This is a long term parked in front of the TV. You don't have to go anywhere. So what does that look like? What's appealing to someone when time isn't a factor? The answer, Quibi.
It's the same approach that a lot of computer games had taken before that, of like, that is where you had the very long fucking, here's this 100-hour adventure that you're going through a dungeon or whatever.
Sure, yeah, your Zorks and stuff like that. Yeah.
Spend hours seeing what happens if you type poo and wee in.
Well, that game has infinite replay value.
You approach a locked door. What do? Do a poo on the ground.
I loved it that they did program in for those text adventures like, what did you just say to me?
Yeah.
Sort of
Grow up.
weird that they got a spelling mistake in the middle of my sentence there. But yeah, so Sega is a lot more arcade heavy with their, which makes sense because they're having success in the arcades.
Yeah.
And then Nintendo, like you said, pivots to these sort of games, and like they come out in the US with Super Mario Brothers at launch, which is huge.
Yeah.
They've got Duck Hunt, I think, as well.
Well, yeah, Duck Hunt is released in October of 85.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Super Mario Brothers is probably the most important game of all time in some way. Like,
it was the best-selling game of all time until 2008. So that was a pretty long reign of being the best-selling video game.
and I feel like culturally, that was the one that shifted people from being like video games are dead to video games are back.
Yeah.
Like they made that. You ever seen The fucking Wizard?
I haven't, no.
Me either.
It sucks.
Yeah.
But that is a movie
Yeah.
that is a promotional product for Super Mario Brothers 3.
Right.
That was made 4 years up, but it was such a fucking phenomenon that Super Mario Brothers is arguably responsible for the uptick in video games culturally, which is fucking nuts. Yeah, it's a good game.
You said before,
I
Knox,
liked
that
it.
the NES and the Master System came out roughly the same time. Came out 2 days apart.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah.
In 83 in Japan, I guess.
No, in the
US.
In 85, in October of the 18th, the NES came out, and October 20th, the Sega Mark III came out. So this is all happening at pretty much the exact same time.
You know what was interesting to me reading up about the NES launch earlier was that they kind of stagger the launch across the US.
Right.
Like it's so funny to think back to a time, first of all, when stuff would come out at wildly different times in different countries and different markets, but even within the same country being like, the West Coast can have a little taste, and then we'll sort of see how how those crazy Californians react to it, and then we'll take it into the Bronx and see how it fares down there.
I'm thinking Super Mario is more of like a sunshine kind of California beaches game. I don't know. New York can have the Sega fucking bit dreary.
But it's fun. It's like those test kitchens that you hear about, where they, where they roll out these like new franchise ideas in these like small town strip malls to just kind of like get a bit of footing and see how it goes. Like you just
who's
never
gonna
get
love
away
Taco
with that
Bell? Paran.
Yeah.
I wish there was a fucking Taco Bell near me.
I still haven't been.
Yeah.
Paran
it's
actually
fine,
delivers to me on Uber Eats, but I feel like Uber Eats isn't the. I went in there a while ago, obviously, and there was a huge line, and I just went.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
It's not worth a line.
I was in it for like 5 minutes. I was like, this is absurd.
It's only like if you're gonna get fast food and do that to yourself, it's for me one of the more enjoyable ones.
Well,
I've had it once or twice, maybe.
Yeah.
It's across the street from a pizza place that my friend works at, where I knew I could get a free slice, and I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Fuck. You know when you go to say something, then your brain's like, nah, buddy, I left that behind a long time ago.
You're out of practice.
Gone.
To interact for so long.
Genuinely, no.
I know, yeah.
It's fucking wild being back. The fucking... No, it's gone. Someone else do something.
But yeah, the rolling it out in different parts of the US, kind of like testing the water, and just now you'd never. It's like piracy and stuff leaking and whatever.
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
it's crazy to think.
Like shorter gaps even between Japan and the West, and Australia is considered part of the West now. That was what I was going to say. Is that in Australia, none of this has happened at this point.
No,
it's not until like '87, right, that we get the NES.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't fucking remember Master Systems being really around at all. Or if they were, they weren't around for long because the Mega Drive...
You're right. I remember getting an NES for my birthday one year with... This is so funny. My mum just took a punt on the game, got me the Tom and Jerry game.
Oh, that game was fucking awesome.
Because your name's Tom.
Yes.
Bless her.
That game was fucking great.
It was pretty cool. Yeah,
I had the Game Boy version of that and played it constantly on the
Yeah.
flight from the UK to Australia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn, you must have been chewing through some double A's on that flight.
Mate.
What was the battery life of the Game Boy like? Probably
I think it was decent.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was all right because you have 4 double A's in there in that original one.
Yeah.
I think it got you about the same as anything now.
Yeah, you're probably
8-ish,
right.
kind of.
Yeah.
Well, not anything now.
I remember
Switch is
Tom
like
and Jerry
an hour
having
and a
some pretty cool, like, impressive stuff where you're playing as Jerry and basically having to avoid Tom across this, like, all these levels in this house.
Yeah.
And then there being these big ones and just the scale of it being really cool where there's this, like, giant Tom kind of taking up half the screen and he's, like, throwing stuff at you.
Yeah.
Being, like... Going back to it, like, very rudimentary, but being like, wow, this is really cool.
It had that platformer thing, and a lot of this came from, like, Super Mario Brothers was the template for platformers the second it came out. And it had that platformer thing of just like, where's this set? Inside of a house? Oh, yeah, cool. I guess we got a whole bunch of those fucking nutcracker soldiers walking around throwing things at us.
Yeah.
Like, just random arbitrary things of like, yeah, this vacuum cleaner's fucking evil and it's going to get you now. That would go for years. But anyway, yeah, so in Australia, we're way behind with all of this. So it's kind of weird to look at all this stuff and how it happened and kind of know it now from the way you hear people talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, to go to your point, we had an NES. You're right. I don't remember finding out about the Master System until well after.
Yeah.
Like Mega Drive being out, Sonic being popular, and then I guess maybe like reading in a gaming magazine like, oh yeah, that thing that was before the Mega Drive that was like the NES equivalent but for Sega, being like, what? I thought they just got straight into the game with the Mega Drive.
I don't know that the Master System was officially released in Australia.
Right, because we've got the TurboGrafx 16, which is also the PC engine in Japan. That never came out over here. So going like years later, sort of finding out about older video games, going like, what the fuck was this thing?
Yeah.
I think
Who's Bonk?
The Game Gear... That little caveman fella. The Game Gear came out here in like 1990, I think.
Right.
I remember really wanting a Game Gear because you could watch TV on it.
Yes.
You could get a thing to like with
an
aerial.
At a primary school camp, one of the fucking kids had a Game Gear. He must have been rich as fuck. He had a Game Gear with the TV thing. He was like, everyone come around to my tent. We're going to watch TV. And then we got there and we're like, oh, wait, we're in the fucking bush. There's nothing here.
Under my tent.
Can't see anything on this.
We're all going to gather around this like screen that's the size of a watch.
Fuck, that was cool, though.
And watch
Blue
community news.
Yeah.
So
the emergency fire broadcast system.
Yeah, the Game Gear came out in 92 and it was based on the Master System hardware.
Right.
It came out here in 92. So it's after the Genesis has been
All the
released.
90s stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because then we're skipping ahead a little bit. But by the time they bring Sonic out on the Mega Drive,
In
and
the
that's
90s
their
stuff.
big.
Yeah.
But they also bring out a version of it on the Master System. They bring it out on the
Yes.
console.
Oh, right.
And
Which
a
I
lot
guess
of
kinda
that
happens
stuff was
now
for
from time to
Europe.
time.
Yeah, there was
Like
European
Persona 5
markets
came
and
out
stuff, though.
PS3 and 4 at the same time.
We'll get a whole bunch of
Anyway.
cross-gen stuff again really soon. too.
Yeah.
But that was like a different game as well. The one that was on the Master System was
Yes, kind of
controlled
scaled
differently.
down. But that's interesting that rather than just go, hey, boom, here's our we want people to buy the Mega Drive. Here's they give a little bit of love to the people who can't be bothered upgrading yet.
And in places like South America and whatever, it was so popular that it made sense to
Yeah.
because there was already a huge install base, and consoles over there in Brazil at least are fucking expensive. So you've got it's all happening at completely different times in different parts of the world. There's no unified thing. We'll talk about this more in the 90s, but like with Sega, for example, Sega of America is a large part of what fucked Sega in the long run.
Yeah.
Like in Japan, the story was very different about the Dreamcast and until the PS2, but like the Saturn in particular.
Yeah.
Sega of America. So all that stuff in the 90s be interesting to talk about. But at this
Whereas
time...
it seems like Nintendo, like with the exception of like changing the design of the Famicom to get it into retailers and everything,
Right.
they're pretty much just taken orders from Japan, just being like, hey, this is this thing we've got coming down the pipe. I guess except for... actually, no, that's not strictly true. I guess like with Super Mario Brothers 2... Then being like, we can't put this is too hard. We can't put this out.
And that was the big thing at the time, is that Western audiences couldn't handle the difficulty that Japanese games often had. So Super Mario Brothers 2 is obviously the big one where that never came out over here. Super Mario Brothers 2.
The Lost Levels came out in 86, the year after Super Mario Brothers.
Right. Because
it
was the same game. It was like a level pack for that.
It was,
Yeah.
And so they rebranded, everyone knows the story, the Doki Doki Panic thing, and made that Super Mario Brothers 2, which is now Super Mario Brothers USA in Japan.
Yeah.
It's sick when you go to Super Potato in Japan,
Yeah.
used game store, and you see like you can see like the Mario Brothers 2, like the original one.
Yeah.
And it's like on a little like it's not a cartridge, like it is a little computer disc thing. It looks so sick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that is
bought
cool.
Super Mario USA. I've got a cartridge of it in my house somewhere.
That's
It's
cool.
a cool little souvenir. But yeah, 85 has obviously Super Mario Brothers, the original. Do we want to talk about that more at all? I mean, it's sort of, we've said, the fact that it establishes the benchmark for video games, basically.
Yeah.
I think the way that, like, at this point, it becomes easier to go back to some of these games that are coming out around this time now as well. Like, the Super Mario Brothers 1 still holds up as being fun.
Yes,
It
I agree.
moves smoothly. You feel like you're properly controlling it. And a lot of contemporaries, or especially early 80s stuff, there's no point playing an Atari 2600 game now.
Yeah.
It's not
No.
fun now.
Yeah.
I'll just run through a few of the major releases. There's a lot on arcade still. So Paperboy comes out, released by Atari in arcades.
I hated Paperboy.
I loved it. It was one of my favorite games as a kid. I loved it.
Paperboy was one of those ones that I just remember finding the controls so hard. There were a few NES things that I would get that were just like, it felt like you needed, you look on the cover and it's like, oh, you're riding a bike and you're chucking, but realizing you had to do it like so precisely.
Oh, yes.
And it felt like you would be punished for not getting the frame just right. Like that sort of
Paperboy.
stuff always really bugged me.
Paperboy especially too was like the poster boy. Paperboy's a poster boy for like the shitty arcade port. And there's 150 million different versions on every console.
Right.
And they all fucking suck.
I played it on PC, and I maybe that helped because it was just like, you figure out the isometric thing of like, up is this direction,
Right.
left is actually this direction.
I'm willing to bet that might have been even an arcade emulated thing. Like, how long
Maybe.
ago is this?
This was early 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
I have no idea about that.
But it was also one of those classic games of like, now remember, when you go past this part, the monster's going to jump out and you got to throw the paper. Like, it's really was about pattern memorization and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was a super, super hard game. Gradius comes out in arcade, Space Harrier, like we mentioned. And yeah, in terms of console, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt. Namco releases a game called Battle City.
This is also a big period too, and in the 90s as well, of games not having tutorials in them, having an instruction manual that a lot of times you had to read. And I remember borrowing games from the video store, and you know, someone who's borrowed it in the past has just lost the manual. Yeah. So now there's just no manual in the game, and plugging it in and being like, I guess I'll just figure it out, and then and just being like, what the fuck am I meant to do? Like, I have no clue. This game isn't giving me any hints about what I'm meant to do here. Can't get on the internet to Google the controls. Like, what is the point? Why am I dying constantly?
I played in the early 90s where I couldn't even make out what the things were in the game. Like, what is that meant to be? Is that a tank or a cat or a tree? I don't know what's going on.
But then they'd have the fun little 80s drawing in the instruction manual where it's like, there's actually a mushroom.
Yeah.
Be like, what the fuck?
I remember one thing I remember about Tom and Jerry was... and I guess probably a lot of games around then did this. If it was trying to do a lot on the screen at once, everything would become really flashy.
Yeah, they were
actually just dropping in. I guess the equivalent of a frame rate drop, but it's like trying to do too much at a time, and everything's just like real flickery and
That there was a limit on how many sprites a thing could display, so it would have one on for one frame and then switch to the other one for the next frame. So that you like the effect was they both flickered, but you can kind of see where they both were.
It is. I guess it's the equivalent of like, you know, Bethesda get a lot of flack for launching stuff that's kind of broken or whatever. I mean, heaps of developers get flack for it, but like that is just such a funny thing of the time of being like, well, this kind of doesn't work. Like, this kind of can't run without it shitting its pants when there's three things on the screen. We'll just put it out. Who cares?
Yeah, it's frame rate problems now. It's fucking texture popping and all that shit. Like, stuff hasn't changed.
Shall we move slightly forward in time to 1986?
Couple other things real quick about 85 is just Gauntlet and Ghosts and Goblins are both.
Oh, yeah, Ghosts and Goblins.
Ghosts and Goblins,
yes. Yeah.
I loved Gauntlet.
But 86, this is where console releases get a bit more hefty. A few pretty big games come out for the Famicom / NES in 1986.
Well, the great man's born this year, so it's time to pick up the pace for
little baby T.
Little baby Tony.
Little baby Tony might have picked up a little game called The Legend of Zelda.
Oh, yeah.
Which was released in February. So you would have been born and it would have been waiting there for you.
In 86?
Yeah.
I'm not born yet.
Yeah.
I'm born in August.
When it's
oh,
been
you mean?
released.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's your being born present, I guess.
You know, Blackbeard, when you were born, he'd already been around, so it was there waiting for you.
Just waiting for me. Yeah.
Pirate ready to go.
Dragon Quest comes out this year.
Yep.
As we mentioned, Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels is released in Japan. Another fucking huge game, Metroid, comes out in 86.
And all of these are kind of like Zelda and Metroid are pretty much inventing genres as they come out.
Interesting.
Or at least solidifying them. Mario Brothers as well. There's probably examples of prototypey type things, but these are the ones where you can point to them and go, that is the earliest example of someone figuring out how this works.
Now, I haven't played any games in this series at all, I don't think. But this is a discussion we've had before on the pod, I think, about the term Metroidvania.
Right.
Because Metroid comes out in August and Castlevania comes out in September.
And those initial Castlevania games are nothing like Metroid.
Right.
They're straight up. I recently, bizarrely, have played through the first 3 Castlevania games.
Right. And they're just, normal side-scrolling?
The
I've
first
played a
one
bit of number one. It's just action.
Yeah.
You got a little chain.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's very fun, but it's closer to like it's more similar to a kind of combat action game
like
now.
Altered Beast game? Like just going...
Yeah, it's like a beat-em-up-ish type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the line from original Castlevania to today ends up in like fucking Devil May Cry or something.
Right.
But Metroid is an exploration game with abilities that you find and you have to figure out where that applies to let you get to a new place. Metroid, they should just be called Metroid games.
Right.
Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, It's the worst fucking subtitle.
It sounds like an educational game.
It really does.
Because pretty much every game is someone's quest. So
Yeah.
there has to be a rule that you can't put.
Yeah.
You can't put that in there.
Yeah.
Super Mario Odyssey, Mario's Quest.
That has the exploration thing, and
Right.
that becomes Metroid-y, but also it fucking sucks.
Right.
It's so unclear and so deliberately obtuse, at least the English translation of it. Apparently the Japanese one is a little better with that stuff.
Right.
But there's some things, and that second Castlevania, the line from that leads to like Dark Souls and stuff, where it's primarily combat, but also some exploration.
Right.
But yeah, the first one absolutely deserves no good. They shouldn't be called Metroidvania games.
Isn't it not until really
because it
Symphony of the
sounds
Night
terrible
that it's
too.
really doing that thing that people... But even by then,
Yeah.
that's so late along that it's
Yeah.
just doing the stuff from Metroid.
Yeah.
At 10 years
Yeah.
after the fact, Super Metroid's come out in like 94 or something, but we'll talk about that in the 90s, I guess.
Another hugely influential game that really...
Castlevania 3 goes back to the first one. It has some exploration
yeah,
stuff, but
right.
it's mainly... and they're all fun, though. Play 2 with a guide.
Right. Big hitter, really something that's got a lasting influence on video games. A game we all would, rate in our top 5. A fun game that isn't frustrating at all. Kid Icarus comes out.
I don't think I've ever played Kid Icarus.
I've tried.
Sincerely.
It's fucking hard and
tough.
frustrating,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's very good. I'm very surprised that Kid Icarus as a character is in Smash Brothers.
Right. Good. The eggplants. You got eggplants in there, right?
What?
Aren't there eggplants in Kid Icarus?
I think you're right.
Really?
As an enemy, like
Or-
fruits and vegetables.
Or are you
I
thinking
think?
of Adventure Island?
Maybe I'm thinking
You
of
might-
Burger
I think you're thinking
Time.
of Adventure
Yeah.
Island.
Kid Icarus? No, it's like ghouls and stuff.
Aubergines.
It's got that very precise platformer thing.
It's
something
constantly
that-
moving up. It's
Yeah.
that thing of that tension
right.
thing where it's like if you drop down, you're dead.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got past the first level as a kid.
I
Same.
don't like
Yeah.
scrolling levels in any game generally anyway, so having a whole game based around it being constantly scrolling doesn't sound great.
Yeah.
You're right. It was funny that they put him in Smash, but I think a part of it was like wanting to just like go back and have this like heritage character. And
Yeah.
then him being in that led to them making a 3DS sequel.
Right.
Rebooting him. And it was pretty cool, but the only fucked thing about it was that it needed two sticks to control it, and the 3DS didn't have a second stick at the time.
Oh.
So you kind of had to do this dumb thing of half controlling it on the touch screen with the stylus.
Oh, boy.
It's a shame because I quite liked it. I thought it was a pretty cool game. Just really let down by how difficult it was to control and the fact that it was on a small screen. If they brought it out now on the Switch, it could be really cool. Or that
right.
format. It's like, flying around and shooting at stuff.
Yeah.
It's completely different to what the first one is, but
Yeah.
just a weird character that they sat on for a long time and then brought him back and
They
it was
had-
like,
They had that big plastic it was called the Circle Pad Pro
yeah.
that came out with it as well, right? And that
Oh.
like added the second stick.
Right.
I remember that, and it looked fucking stupid.
It was basically you would strap it to your thumb and you would then use it on the touch screen.
Oh, no. There was like a big plastic thing you put your whole 3DS into that
You're
had
right,
a physical
yes.
second stick.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was all these really dodgy ways around
Yeah.
having it. And then they did re-release the 3DS with a second stick, but it was
Right.
like, surely it would have been worth thinking about this
Yeah.
day one. But yeah, tough game.
Yeah.
Did we mention... I want to talk about Zelda a bit more, and did we mention Dragon Quest?
Yes, I did.
I was going to
briefly,
ask, so Dragon Quest doesn't start coming out in the West for quite a while.
None of these Japanese RPGs really do. Final Fantasy takes years afterwards.
Yeah.
And then they only put out the first one, the fourth, and the sixth
That's
for
right.
a long time. And then Dragon Quest, I think they put kind of all of them out. I might be wrong about that. There might have been a SNES one that they didn't. But they come out in a staggered, years after. Because they got to translate. There's a lot of text at the time
Yeah.
in these games. And Dragon Quest, I think, is kind of similar to Mario Brothers and all that stuff, is kind of the one that becomes the template for this is what would later become, in the West, be called a JRPG.
It's funny how you look at the way, again, a classic example of different marketing where all the designs in Dragon Quest are done by one of my favorite illustrators, Akira Toriyama, who has this like incredibly vibey style, does the cover art and everything, and then they bring them out. You look at the original American box art.
I'm looking at it right now.
And just what they thought American audiences would gravitate more to
right.
over this like cartoony style is just this like bullshit generic, like just looks like a
fantasy
bad
novel.
fantasy novel.
Yeah.
It's so weak.
It's called Dragon Warrior as well in the
Yeah,
States.
yeah.
And it came out in 89, so 3 years later.
Motherfucking box art in the West, at least on
Dog
NES
shit.
games, is terrible. You ever seen how dumb Mega Man looks?
Oh,
Like a
yes.
fucking
Yeah,
asshole.
they get
Yes.
those dumb paintings done. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's brutal.
Is
Real
Mega
brutal.
Man out? Yeah, but at Zelda as well is like at the time, and it's hard to kind of get context for it now, but at the time, the openness of that game was a big deal for people.
Gold
Yeah.
cartridge, right?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Big map,
That's
big map
right.
in the box.
Yeah, yeah.
Big map, gold
Yeah.
cartridge.
Yeah.
Sign me up. I'm
Yeah.
calling my daughter after you. I'm Robin Williams.
Two big years for Miyamoto. Super Mario Brothers, and then I guess the sequel, but Zelda as well.
Yeah.
He's established two separate genres in video
Yeah.
gaming.
Kind
Yeah.
of. Both about him exploring the woods as a child.
Yes. A favourite fact after the Doki Doki Panic thing. There's Sega's still hitting big in the arcade. They released Alex Kidd as an arcade game in
Really?
86. Yeah.
I never knew that was an arcade game. I loved Alex Kidd growing up.
Alexander Kidd.
Yes.
I would love to see rebooted 3D Alex Kidd.
I would be keen to. I think I only ever played it at a friend's house. I never had a Sega.
What about this?
Oh, he's got his
Here we
hand
go.
up.
So,
ladies
like,
and gentlemen.
God of War 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing of that is like, well, Kratos is a bit older now. He's got a little bit more perspective.
Yes.
He maybe views his old self differently. He's grown between the reboot and the original.
I think I know where he's going with this.
Now, Alex Kidd,
Yes.
what if
Yes.
you did a reboot of that,
Yes.
but instead of calling him Alex Kidd,
Yeah, I've got an idea. Of
you
what it
call
could be
him
called.
James Kidd,
yeah. Yeah.
and he's grown enough that he's changed his identity.
Yeah.
Only the first name, because he
Yeah.
still wants some people to be able to look him up on Facebook. He's
I
got
was-
family he doesn't know about.
I was
and-
going to say Alex Grown Up Kid. Maybe that could be. Maybe that's an alternate title.
I fucking never liked Alex Kidd.
Really?
I always thought they were not great platformers.
I remember there's a boss in one of them where you just play rock, paper, scissors against
Yeah.
him.
Oh, really?
There's
Fuck.
heaps of Junken Po. I think it is
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Japanese.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I like the style. You can race as him in there's
No,
a
you
Sega
didn't.
racing game where you can
Oh,
can play
right.
as him. Yeah.
I think I just had that. It was that mystique of like, I never owned that console, never really got to play those games. It always
Right.
seemed kind of cooler.
It was like programmed into Mega Drives or something, or maybe even Master Systems.
That's
if you
right.
turned it on without a cartridge, it'd just be like, "Here's Alex Kidd for
Oh,
you, baby."
cool.
That's right,
That's awesome.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes, Sega also released Wonder Boy and Outrun in arcades. So yes, they're still killing it. Like they're still a big player in video games at this point. In terms of console releases, I guess we kind of went through all of them.
You got a couple PC games coming out as well. Like there's all the those Sierra adventure games
Oh,
are all
yeah.
coming out
Yes,
at the moment, like
yes.
King's Quest and Space Quest and all of that.
Yep.
So the adventure genre is moving on from like the text-based thing to this weird like middle ground that it's in now before you get
Yeah.
into the pointy-clicky kind of LucasArtsy type stuff later on.
Might and Magic, I think, gets maybe its first game on a computer
Sure.
this year. Yeah. So
That-
that's definitely in that same genre. What else? Oh, we were talking before we were recording about the Twin Famicom, which is released in '86 by Sharp and includes a disc system and looks fucking awesome. And I think at least two of us on the show want to buy one
Yeah.
from eBay.
$400 on eBay. That's not too bad.
Yeah.
This is
For something
That's so
that's
much
kind
money.
of a rarity.
Yeah.
I guess so.
I'd expect something like that to be, I don't know, kind of like tech curiosity stuff.
Mm.
I always expect to be like 1,000 minimum.
Sure.
Yeah,
But you're
yeah.
right, 400 for something that I wouldn't even be able to plug into my TV
useless.
is an
Yeah.
absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
And would at some point feel embarrassed about displaying too prominently on a shelf
Yeah.
because you know how much you've paid for it, and if someone
Yeah.
starts asking questions, you have to fess up to that.
I mean,
Yeah.
Knox could afford a third Switch with that money.
Exactly.
Just someone coming around who doesn't know much about games and like asking me about it and me explaining them going, cool, can we play it? Absolutely not.
No. Do you have a CRT TV with an RF input? No, you don't. In 1987, speaking of the Discom system,
The Twin Famicom.
that one, Zelda 2 comes out on that in Japan
Right.
in 87.
Nintendo Japan, they fucking love it. They love chucking a fucking disc drive onto a console, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Man for it.
Yeah.
They never really got it right.
They never
This
really
one,
got
this
it
one
right.
was fine, but then the second one led to the PlayStation,
Yeah.
and then the
Yes.
third one was the
The
64 DD,
Double
which didn't
D.
really work.
Yeah.
And then when
yeah.
they finally made a disc-based console, they were like, make the discs small.
I like.
Yeah, make
That's
him
so
bad.
funny that them finally being like, all right, you know what? Let's cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
make this thing cartridges. We all know what's gonna happen. 2 years in, someone's gonna have the bright spark of making a CD drive add-on.
Yeah.
Let's just get straight to it and make it a fucking CD. I loved those mini CDs though. I
They
thought
looked cool,
sick.
but the idea that they had a conversation with like, how much data can you fit on a DVD? That's too much.
Yeah.
Shrink it.
Join an existing production line? No, let's make it awkward to produce.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Zelda 2, I think, is really good. A lot of people, it's kind of like a black sheep thing. A lot of sequels around this time as well.
Yeah.
Were very much a different thing to the
Gotta
first.
yeah.
And Zelda 2 is a really fun 2D side-scrolling combat game.
Oh, like a Castlevania game.
Like a Castlevania.
I've got to play. I've never played it. It's funny
neither.
how
It's
how they went. But Mario 2, they just make the exact same game.
Yeah.
And then Zelda, they're like, let's fuck the formula.
Yeah.
Let's
But
completely.
Castlevania 2 was a pretty big departure from the original in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah.
And like in the West, Super Mario Brothers 2 is this fucking crazy other thing. So the way that things look from over here is like, wow, I guess the second one has to be fucking weird.
Yeah.
Leisure Suit Larry in the Land of the Lounge Lizards comes out in
Yeah.
87.
Yeah.
So this is the point where everything starts going downhill. The original Metal Gear came out on the MSX2.
Wow.
Oh, really? I thought it was an NES, like a Famicom.
There was a port that was like different on the NES.
Right.
But the 1 and 2, the originals were on the MSX2, which
Right.
is like a computer that was popular in Japan.
Apogee starts as a
Oh,
company?
hell yeah.
Yeah.
I played so many Apogee
Me too.
demos back in the day.
Yeah, a lot of
Monster
shareware.
Bash.
Yes.
Wacky wheels.
Wacky Wheels, yeah.
Forbidden Planet. That little green cunt with the plungers.
Was, Cosmo's Cosmic
Cosmos
Adventure.
Cosmic Adventure. What's
Yes.
Forbidden Planet then?
It might be an alternate name for it,
It's
actually.
Cosmos Quest. I think that it maybe is the same thing. But yeah, you've got those Final Fantasy blows out of the water in December 18.
Yep, go listen to our Bandcamp episode for that.
Yeah,
we talk
sure.
about every Final Fantasy game.
That's probably better. Phantasy Star comes out 2 days later on the Master System as well.
Right.
Which I've never played them and I've always wanted to go back in because it's like a sci-fi fantasy kind of thing and they're meant to be good.
They look cool.
Yeah.
Again, just a franchise that's just absolutely passed me by.
Yes,
Completely. Same. Sid Meier is starting to become a name as well. He puts Pirates out.
Right.
You know, Blackbeard? Already alive before.
Well, I was born in March of 1987.
Were you really?
Yes.
What came out in March of 87? Let's have a look here. Nothing.
Nothing of note.
No. Literally, at least
Don't even bother, it says on Wikipedia.
where I'm looking
Little
it
Penis
skips
Adventures comes release.
Ben's Quest. Yeah, that PC Engine thing comes out. So I don't know fucking much about that TurboGrafx
No.
PC Engine.
Again, yeah. Did that even get released here in
Not in Australia, no.
I've never seen, apart from being in Super Potato and seeing them used in there, I've never seen one in the wild.
Yeah.
IRL.
In terms of arcade stuff, Konami releases Contra, which is a huge one.
A lot of people weren't into it. Some people were, but some people weren't. It was sort of divisive. Controversial was what you
Yeah.
expected
No,
me
I
to
got
say.
it. I got it.
Adam's Quest.
Yeah. It was released on the
to
NES.
trick everyone into thinking I'm saying it
Legend
different.
of the Pun.
No. Double Dragon comes out in arcades. And a little fighting game by the name of Street Fighting is released by Capcom in August of 1987.
And no one really likes Street Fighter, and it kind of fucking sucks if you go back and play it now.
Yeah.
But, building blocks from little things, big things grow.
I can't wait to talk about Street Fighter. I'm going to reread that. There's this great article about the oral history of Street Fighter 2.
All right.
And the people making it just sound like absolute madmen. There's all these just great stories of them just in the office just being freaks.
Yeah. It's, Street Fighter 1 does not have the same regard as Super Mario 1. Like, it's...
No,
No one
it's not a
talks
good
about
game
it.
though.
Right.
Street Fighter 1, didn't sort of invent that genre. That was already like the karate, whatever. There
Kung
were some
Fu,
games.
I think,
Karate
came
Champ.
out.
Karateka Is that what I'm thinking of? There's a
Maybe.
few like fighting games already. Street Fighter is almost like an also ran with
Right.
that stuff, and it's not until 2 that it reinvents that wheel.
Right.
In 80, what the fuck year am I looking at?
We're looking at
88.
87.
87. It's done. That's
no,
in the past.
there's still heaps of stuff.
What else comes out in 87? Give me one thing that came out in 1987 that is still worth talking about.
Yeah, Ben.
The Master System was released in Japan.
No, it wasn't.
Someone has made an error on this Wikipedia page.
maybe they renamed it or something and it wasn't the Mark whatever.
Oh, maybe.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
knows?
Nah, you're right. We've Castlevania 2. Oh, Punch Out comes out in 87.
Okay.
Now
Yep.
I'll give you Punch Out.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you fucking open your mouth again,
Ah!
I will punch out.
This is actually what I wanted to mention. LucasArts starts becoming a real player in adventure games. They
Right.
released that Scum engine.
Yep.
So Maniac Mansion is
Maniac
the first.
Mansion is the first.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
So that's all kicking off. Now we're allowed to move forwards.
Well, 1988 doesn't have that much interesting.
Wow.
I reckon. Yeah, you got Super Contra, you got another Dragon Quest game. You're starting to get into these things that have been established a few years earlier.
Yeah, the
If you're someone who in
franchises.
'83 was like, well, this little fad's done,
Yeah.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
in the space of 3 years, there's these huge, which, like you said, Legend of Zelda when that first came out,
Yeah.
open world, like these huge things, these huge experiences that are selling heaps. That are, yeah. I mean, you talked before about the Wizard, like. I was reading up on this a while ago, like the event of Mario Brothers 3 coming out. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but like it says a lot that like in a pretty short space of time, they're churning out these sequels, and even in that space of time, it's like this huge fucking event
Yeah.
that this is coming out.
Yeah.
That the third one of these is coming out.
I'm seeing here in 88, Mega Man 2 came out. So Mega Man 1 presumably came out earlier than that, and we skipped over it. But
I didn't see it. Maybe it came out in 84 and we didn't do it last time.
no, it was. I think it was 86.
Oh,
Personally.
right. Okay. Mega Man.
This is
Thinking
because at
about
this
it now.
time, yeah, sequels come along within about a year or so.
There are
afterwards.
6 Mega Man games on the NES.
Yeah, right.
So
wow.
they are fucking hanking them out. Capcom is going wild.
December 87. So
Okay.
it just wasn't listed on that page that we were like scrolling through.
Well, if they're going to make me do my own fucking research, I'm going to end this episode right here because there's no fucking chance I'm doing that, man.
Altered Beast, which I mentioned just a little bit earlier, comes out in the arcade. Again, Sega is still dominating the arcades. Wasteland comes out, which is a game franchise I've never really dipped in on, but is like an influence on Fallout.
So there were some games that were already out by now called The Bard's Tale that were
right.
like these.
Sounds fucking lame.
Yeah. That were like
What's his tale? Oh, I got beaten up the other day for being a bard.
they're like a different style of sort of Western RPG to what would happen later. And Wasteland is in that vein, and it's like a precursor to Fallout,
Right.
sort of. There's some similar people involved.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dragon Quest 3 is coming out.
You
Bionic
got
Commando.
your Bionic Commandos, you got your fucking Doki Dokis, Ninja Gaidens come along to have a little slash around.
Yep.
You got your fucking John Madden football.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. That is
Jonathan
interesting.
Madden wants to play.
Yeah, EA. I've been noticing already in the previous years, EA are just buying up other companies.
Yeah,
in the
right.
late
Very
80s.
aggressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, things are chugging along. Same way with any kind of console generation to this day. You get a few. Well, actually, except for this one, which didn't really seem to launch heaps of stuff early. There weren't big new
Sure.
franchises that came along.
No, I mean, we're like deep in the middle of a 3-decade franchise spanning thing. Like, we got so many sequels come out in the past 10 years.
But then even like at the start of every generation, kind of, there've been some new games that are like in the one previous, like the 360, like Gears of War, for example.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I can't, off the top of my head, think of ones from this most recent generation where the consoles came out and then it was like, and here's fucking the Assassin's Creed equivalent or whatever the
Character.
new...
Yeah, good point actually.
Yeah, PS3 had a bunch, like
Uncharted, Last of
The
Us.
Last of Us was PS3, yeah.
And like BioShock and like a whole bunch of things that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's technically System Shock as well. But and yeah, Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect, a lot of things that were like new. Here's this new technology. We can do this big new thing. I mean, that didn't really happen this console generation that much.
Yeah.
So
Well, we'll just have to wait. Maybe when Death Stranding 2 comes out, we'll be able
Death
to
Stranding.
say.
Of course. How could I forget? But yeah, things are kind of just chugging along at this point. In a good way, there's a lot of good games coming out.
They're chugging. They're getting faster because, like you mentioned, Super Mario Brothers 3 comes out in Japan in 1988, and that is fucking great.
It's a very good game. It's so much better than the first one as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Fucking does it? Oh yeah, there it is. October 23rd. First appearance of the Koopalings.
Great. Some lore. In the,
Yeah, for how much that, it's like, the first one is very much just, hey, go to this castle.
Yep.
And then bringing in, this bad guy's got kid. I mean, there's still not really anything in the way of story, but
yeah,
you kind of go through different lands a bit more. Like
totally. I feel like there's more like implied backstory in 3.
Yeah.
Like the first one is nothing. There's almost no detail on the models, so it's like I can't even imagine what's going on here.
You have those little mini game houses where you do the matchup thing.
Yeah.
Biggest thing in 88 is probably that the Mega Drive launches in Japan. We'll probably save talking about Mega Drive stuff until next week.
Sure.
Yeah, like we said before, it's
When
a lot more 90s.
Yeah, it hits Australia in the 90s, really kick off.
Yeah.
Mario Brothers 3 actually, it's got text. It's got dialogue.
Yeah, a little tiny bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a new thing, I think, for Mario, right?
No, in the first one, Toad's like,
Oh,
Princess
yeah,
ain't
Toad's
here.
like, yeah, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the first example of texting games. So yeah, 88 is kind of like business as usual, but 89, the one massive major thing happens to my mind. The release of the Game Boy is fucking enormous.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a monumental thing that takes place in 1989.
Tetris.
So that's the popularization of Tetris. That game was made in like 84 on whatever like genuinely Soviet computer that what's his name made it on.
Yep.
You don't get analysis like this anywhere else. That's why you come here for the big. But
And it had been out on the NES already.
yeah, and there was like
so
an arcade version
Yeah.
as well. But the Game Boy is where it really fits nicely, like a straight block into a line waiting to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's so easy to forget because most people when they think of it, I'm sure, think Game Boy. It's
Right.
like but the fact that they wanted to put it on the Game Boy because they'd had a degree of success with it on the NES.
Yeah.
And it still always has felt to me weird playing it on something that's not portable in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Playing it tethered to a TV has always felt unnatural.
I think it was a pack-in. I think Tetris as well was like you got it with every Game Boy you bought.
Yeah.
Pack-ins happened a lot more back then as well.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, what a good decision.
Yeah,
Fucking
big time.
Great game, obviously, and a very good version of it on the Game Boy. Made sense. Weirdly, the Atari Lynx came out in 89 as well.
I had a Lynx.
Yeah, I had a Lynx as well.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
You want to talk battery chewing, those things fucking
brutal.
sucked them down.
I've got to play it like once every 3 months because that's when I would be like, please remember to buy some batteries for this. And yeah, obviously, it was never a priority.
But it had color and it was backlit, and
Yeah.
that was the one that you could spin it around the other way around if you were left-handed, and it had 2 D-pads and 2 buttons, right?
I believe I only had one game for it.
Yep. Paperboy.
Batman Returns.
Okay.
And it was sick. It was really, really fun. Like I'd never seen the movie. So I didn't really know what was going on, but it was cool and it was very, very difficult.
I had Rampage on it.
Oh, nice.
That was sick.
Yeah.
I'd played Paperboy on my friend's Atari Lynx.
Right.
At some point. I remember he had this fucking setup in their car where it was plugged into the cigarette lighter and then a wire would go down, under and through and was like brought up and hooked over the little handle thing up the top of the thing.
Oh, yeah.
So you could have a car
nice.
charger plugged into the Lynx at all times.
Oh, very
It's
nice.
funny because it
Crazy.
did take Nintendo a long time to get around to having color on a handheld, and it just left them wide open for like the Game Gear and the like. As much as I loved the Game Boy, just the appeal of a color screen seemed so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is weird that black and white, well, it was like green LCD
Yeah.
thing was accepted as it was as accepted as it was.
Yeah, and then they had the pocket which cleared it up. Because remember the lag on it too? Like if you're playing a
was like-
platformer, it was like so jittery.
It was smudgy and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of like, kind of gross looking.
but it still World had that weird Super Mario Land on it, where it's like different bad guy, different
Super
princess.
Mario Land. Yeah, Princess Daisy.
Yeah.
Super Mario Land was fucking great. I think that was a launch game for the... it's terrible compared to all the others now, but I remember playing that game a bunch, and I loved how weird it was.
Yeah.
It felt like... Because by the time I was playing that, I already kind of had an idea of what Mario stuff looked like, and everything being so different in them trying to shrink it down to the Game Boy gave it this weird feeling that I enjoyed.
There's some weird story about it where it's kind of developed separately in some weird way where they didn't know what was happening with, I don't know. There's something about it that kind of, I remember reading up on it a while ago. There's something about the way that it was made that kind of explains why it's so weird. Right. Like, it's not them deliberately going, let's set it in the desert and have a different princess. Like, it's kind of a fuck up. Right. Sort of like how Link's Awakening started as like an experiment in like trying to get a Link to the Past on the Game Boy, and they're sort of doing it in secret, and you know, they put Kirby and stuff in there without even really asking anyone else at Nintendo if they mind. And you know, it's something a bit along those lines. But we
went to a little bit of intrigue for you on the podcast.
go back and listen to our first half of Super Mario Brothers history.
Yeah, we probably talk about it there.
It's like episode. I actually have no idea, but it was ages ago. You can look it up. We did that as a free.
But there's levels where you're controlling a little submarine, and it's got this weird thing where when he's the fire mushroom, like they bounce around a lot more.
They're like balls more than fire balls, which is still a type of ball, I guess. More of an orb. You got Super Mario Land. Golden Axe comes out. Yep. I guess in the arcades probably.
Yep.
Originally. I used to love Golden Axe.
Yeah.
It was beat 'em up games, man.
Beat 'em up games.
I guess they do still kind of exist. Again, like Devil May Cry-ish type of games. Essentially beat 'em ups.
Yeah. I was playing a bit of Streets of Rage 4 the other day.
Oh, right.
When we're back
Not allowed to talk about it.
I know. We'll just teasing. Just teasing.
June 18th.
Yeah. SimCity comes out in 1989.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah. Huge.
Sid Meier's Civilization. When's that fucking coming out? Will Wright is SimCity.
Yeah, Maxis.
Is Civilization out yet?
Is it out
Where
yet?
the fuck's Civilization? The Ducktales game for the NES.
Oh, yes, a classic.
Yeah.
And then I think a pretty big one on the PC is Prince of Persia.
Yes. Yeah.
Huge.
It comes out on the Apple II initially, apparently.
Did we talk about that maybe on a Patreon episode as well? Because we've definitely talked about like the rotoscoping and how all that animation stuff was done. Like it's a fascinating game, and I always was really scared by it when I played it as a kid.
It's weird looking, isn't it?
Yeah.
To go back to DuckTales briefly, this is a thing that exists kind of around this time that doesn't exist anymore, which is cool, very good Japanese developers getting a crack with a Western license.
Sure.
You know, Konami making all those cool Ninja Turtles games.
Goof Troop game on the SNES,
Yeah,
well, the first Ninja Turtles game comes out on the NES this year.
Those were like the beat 'em up ones, I guess, right?
Yes,
the arcade one's the beat 'em up one. There was also
Yeah.
like a one that was developed just for the NES that was pretty brutal.
Yeah,
and
that's the
being
one
really
that I
hard.
had. It was fucking impossible.
Top down in bits, and then
Yes.
you'd go into the sewers. Yeah, it was really fucking hard.
Yeah.
Because one thing we've not really talked about that much and runs kind of counter that seal approval thing, or like serves to prove the point that it was only a money-based thing rather than a quality thing. There are so many shit license games coming out around this time.
Oh, yes.
Of like bad fucking Back to the Future games and all that. This is where movies especially changed in how they existed. I guess Star Wars did it initially.
Everything has to have a tie-in and
Yeah.
the McDonald's toy.
And all the Ghostbusters and whatever of the world that take
Yep.
place during the 80s, all the games that are made after them are fucking dog shit 80 million% of the time.
Yeah.
I was going to say 89, but like, 90-something % of the time
That's what I mean.
in this era.
Konami and Capcom just like having those licenses and making genuinely really good games.
Yeah.
With just a cool coat of paint on it, little Scrooge McDuck running around. They're kind of the outliers, but like, these Western licenses being farmed out to Japanese companies as opposed to like, I guess a Western company making a game based on an American movie and not really knowing what they're doing in terms of making a game.
But it happens sometimes where you get like the Mummy Demastered and those sort of ones where it's like they kind of just made whatever game and then they're like, all right, I guess we'll put fucking Fred Flintstone in this. Who cares?
Yeah.
Man, the Game Boy was good.
So December 15th, this is probably the key date for the year. Hudson Soft releases Bonk's Adventure.
Damn, Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Quest.
Yeah.
Introducing the TurboGrafx 16 mascot and starting the Bonk franchise, which really... How many games were there in the Bonk franchise?
I played a bit of Bonk a little while ago. It's not bad.
Oh, yeah?
It's actually all right.
Keep you up at night, did it?
Yeah, you guys have fun last night?
Good
Oh, we played a little Bonk.
Yeah.
Damn, okay.
I was also playing this other launch game
Hudson
called
Hard.
Rumpy Pumpy Adventure.
Oh, there's actually heaps of Bonk games. 1, 2,
Yeah,
3,
Bonk
4,
was around for a while. And then Son of Bonk. Was that the original Son of? You know, like Son of the Mask and
The
all
Yeah.
original son of.
What was the first thing that was like, this is Son of
What
this?
was the first thing to have a child?
Yeah.
But to specifically be like Son of.
Yeah, good. That's a good pop culture question.
Yeah. What was
It
the...
can't be Bonk.
What was the guy
There's
thinking?
absolutely no way that it's Bonk.
Son of. Try like, see if you can find it, Ben.
Origin of son of...
Because I think the other end. I don't know. Do you have anything more to say about the Game Boy? It was so huge, but I feel like everyone
We'll
kind of
probably
knows
touch on
what
it a little
is.
more in the 90s, maybe.
Yeah. Well, 'cause
Because then
then
it
you got-
gets into the spin-offs and the...
And you got the Pocket and the Color
Yeah.
coming out. Yeah. The Super
War-
Game Boy.
Wario Land 3. Sorry, Mario Land 3. Oh, no, that's...
That'd
again,
be in
that's
the 90s.
90s.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think the only other massive thing from the 80s, because like we haven't talked about PC games as much as a million fucking DOS games that are coming out
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of them are available for free to browse around on like abandonware websites. You can find them pretty easily.
Yeah.
Now.
I had a Who Framed Roger Rabbit DOS game that
Had
came on about 10 different floppy disks that you had to
yeah.
like install, and it took like an
and
hour to install.
after Tommy saw Jessica Rabbit in the game, so did he. Came on about 10 floppy disks as well.
Oh
Jesus.
my god! Wow.
Tell you what,
I think that
not many
from,
pixels in that waist.
10 from a floppy,
Damn, she's looking good.
10 from a floppy disk into a hard drive, if you know what I'm saying.
She had pixels all the way up to her hips.
Yes.
Yeah, I really batted my little dick off over that cartoon rabbit,
Yeah.
if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it was still just a 3-inch floppy. But,
That'd
you
be
know.
so funny. Watching Roger Rabbit being like, fuck, that rabbit's hot.
Yeah. We all jack off to the rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? Oh,
Look at
yeah,
those
Jessica's
giant
so
feet.
hot. No,
Yeah.
like her husband.
What's his fucking name? Doc Brown? What's the actor's name?
Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, he was good looking in that movie. When his eyes pop out.
Yeah,
tell you what,
something popped out of my fly.
How about that talking cab? Boy, I'd like to put my banana in that tailpipe.
Yeah, I want to fuck Bob Hoskins.
Just want to dip my dick in that vat of acid the shoe dies in.
I heard Richard Gere put one of the weasels up his ass.
Ah.
It's an old urban legend I heard.
I had to pay quite a lot of money for it, but I got that cartoon car to stomp its tire on my dick.
Oh.
Felt good.
Oh, that's the end of the 80s.
Well, there's one more thing. So, yeah, there's more.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Let's finish at the end of our conference. Oh, wait a minute. One more thing.
Yeah, we haven't talked about computer stuff as much, but I feel like the DOS stuff, early 90s, that bleeds hugely into... Because, like, there's some PC games that come out in the 90s that are the biggest in the world.
Yeah, yes.
But the computer stuff is still a little off to the side in the late
Yep.
80s.
Yeah.
A little non-mainstream. Except for some games that premiere in version 3.0 of Microsoft Windows, which is released towards the end of 89, I believe.
Oh, right.
And those are Solitaire and Minesweeper,
Oh, nice.
which are genuinely probably the games I've put the most time into over the course of my life.
Yeah. I was actually never a Minesweeper guy, but I played a lot of Solitaire.
A lot of people didn't understand Minesweeper out of the gate.
Yeah.
I don't think I did.
Took me a long time.
Like when I was playing a Windows 3.1 PC,
Yeah,
I was super young. Like I would have played it in the early 90s.
right. They used to get children to go sweep for mines in There's some war zones where that happens. So you were prime age to do
That's
it.
true, yeah. I didn't have the on-the-job training,
Because
though.
they're light enough that if they push the pressure plate, it's not necessarily going to get them.
That's very interesting.
It's smart. It's clever. It should be done.
It's good business.
Yeah, it makes
is.
sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of cool that came out, and so Windows starts being a thing soonish, or Windows 3 point whatever.
Yeah.
But DOS is still the primary game platform until 95 comes around.
Totally, and I
Right.
think next episode or next time we do one of these, we'll get into the Mega Drive. We'll get into PC gaming in a big way. I think that's probably where. Yeah.
Early 90s DOS is the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fucking cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That
The
is probably
SNES.
the actual dawn of my gaming because I
Yeah.
don't think we got a NES until like 93 or 94, something like that. Like
Yeah.
the first games I played were on
Wow.
PC.
early 90s DOS, you got the SNES, you got the Mega Drive, and you start coming into maybe that's the time to talk about the 3DOs and the fucking weird ass, like the CDIs and all those sort of things.
Yep.
The Neo Geo.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, that'll be the 90s.
Let's wrap this one up. That's the 80s done and dusted, fellas.
Yep.
See you later, flock of seagulls haircut. Hello, flock of seagulls eating my chips.
Yeah.
That I enjoyed in the 90s.
The classic 90s pastime.
We recorded this episode on cocaine. Next week, it's heroin.
I'm going to take GHB in the 2000s.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And you can head to filthycasuals.com.au for links to all the other stuff that we have. We've got the Patreon. You can get a bonus episode every week. We've got our premium episodes on Bandcamp. We've got our Let's Plays on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week for this first part of the look back at the 90s. And
probably next week. If there's big news and stuff, we might take a little gap between doing we'll try to keep the 2 decade episodes together.
Yeah.
And the idea is to do all 6 of these kind of for fun at once.
Yeah.
But if some shit happens that we want to talk
breaks.
about, maybe we'll delay a week or whatever.
Yeah.
I knew the thing where I have to say something at the end of the episode was coming up, so I googled 80s sayings. So I'm gonna read the top few 80s sayings.
Okay.
Lead
him in.
I promise you that this is the first one that came up.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya.
No, come on.
All right. Thanks very much for listening.
Because we're in real life as well. You could see how disappointed my face was then too.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And as we say here at the end of every episode of Filthy Casuals,
gag me with a spoon. That's genuinely barf me out is the next one. Fat, bad, bag your face. What's your damage? Have a cow. No dare.
Oh, no dare is classic.
That's an all-timer. That shouldn't be on the list of things no one says anymore.
Well, gag me with a spoon.